I'm Nicola Talent, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com. Eamon, I'm really sorry about the cold in here, but just there was a little incident yesterday when I was reading some stuff for some subscription content we'll have next week, and I nearly fell asleep because I had the aircon off, and I was sitting here and I was reading it out, and it just goes to show how it's almost like second nature to me now. NASA said something over the intercom thing, and I nearly jumped out of my.
At least it wasn't one of my stories you were reading that sent you to sleep.
Really, really bad now. It was really like, so I decided aircon has to go on. We'll have to sit in see, there's no air.
They're sitting here in a hoodie.
Sit here in a hoodie and just
give it a bit of atmosphere.
We'll suffer for our art. So good to see you.
And you too. Welcome back.
Thank you.
To see you as well.
Thanks very much. We're going to talk about some drug dealing brothers from Galway, which is not a place that we often get an insight into gang activity and what's going on, but this is a story that you were writing, and it's concerning. It's a Criminal Assets Bureau case, but a lot of people won't know who these guys are.
Well, the target of the Criminal Assets Bureau case was Gary Ward, who is described as the leader of this particular organised crime group, as the terminology they always use, and his wife Debbie, she wasn't involved in the crime but was aware of where the money was coming from and benefited from, I suppose, her partner's work as a drug dealer. And
Are they Galway City now, or where?
They're Galway City, Newcastle area, where he grew up and spent most of his life. He never had a job. There was some evidence that he might have recently started work as a courier, but there was no returns of revenue or anything like that. So as far as they could see, he never had any kind of real legitimate income, never held a job. And he was kind of seen as the leading light in this group. It was basically called, it was a family group, and two of his brothers, Declan and Michael, were also named as being leading figures in this. And they basically, were one of, I suppose, the most significant, as the word used, suppliers of heroin and cocaine in Galway City County, and then some parts of Mayo and Leitrim as well. So they had
pretty big area
business going. Yeah.
And what sort of age group are they, the brothers?
As they say, when you don't know the answer straight away, that's a good question. I think Gary is 37 off the top of my head. Declan is younger, and Michael is the older brother. But it was Gary, I suppose, he was considered the leading light.
Right.
Directing operations, and he was. He's the main man. That's the way they're describing it.
So there'll be two strands to this. There's the Criminal Assets Bureau case against them, which will, focus on what assets they have collected over the last few years. And then there's the evidence, which gives us an insight into how the gang worked and what they were doing. So you take the helm on what you want to talk about first.
Well, the guards set up an Operation Lamprey. And in August 2023, they raided a number of properties, and one of those raided was Gary and Debbie's house in Galway. And they basically took it was about 12 grand in cash, a Rolex watch, the lady's watch, 2 Ford Focus cars, and a Ford Transit van. So, like, on the face of it, you'd say it's not a whole lot. But as you say, then the evidence that was given, the belief evidence that kind of really outlined and detailed how the gang worked and what roles the others played, certainly it gives it was an insight. Like the counsel for CAB described their modus operandi as reprehensible, in that they sought out and identified vulnerable people either through a drug addiction or drug debts, and basically intimidated and forced them into carrying out all their dirty work. And this included, travelling to Dublin or Limerick or wherever to pick up their supply, to then store it, then to bag it, mix it and bag it and have it ready for sale and supply. And they I suppose tried to keep as arm's length as possible in that sense, but did it by this kind of pretty nasty kind of version of events, or way of working, where they
didn't want to pay anyone, so they were using vulnerable addicts who they were, basically setting them to work under threat.
Yeah, and they were being supplied. They had supply contacts, as it was put, in Dublin, the Midlands, and Limerick. So they were well connected in that sense. So they're obviously shopping around for the best deals, or wherever the best product, or the most, the cheapest product might be what they were after. But whatever was available, they'd switch obviously between different suppliers for different drugs as well. And of course, these people at the very bottom of the gangland food chain were being sent out to do it, and were explicitly told to do exactly what they were, ordered to do, or they would face consequences, and their families would face consequences as well.
Really similar scenario to what we've heard from some of the gangs in Drogheda, what we've heard from some of the major gangs in West Dublin. And it is that identifying and using addicted people who will create or owe a debt, or maybe not. It's all there in the ether, and they're constantly forced to work for free. Do you think that's the MO now of most gangs, or is it just specific to certain types of drug outfits?
I don't know. I'd say a lot of it depends on, I suppose, the personality of those involved. So if you have, say, somebody controlling street dealing who is big and violent, they're probably going to go that way because they find it easy. Other people might have to find other ways of motivating a sales force, and maybe take a step back from the actual street dealing themselves, and possibly lose out on a cut of their profits because they're trading it off with someone else.
But they're also paying their workers.
Yeah, I mean, you would imagine paying your workers is probably the best way to do it. But I mean, I'd say finding good staff is difficult, like in this business, that you're not necessarily going to be able to find someone who's competent, who's going to turn up on time and work, day in, day out. I mean, there was, Gary Ward it emerged, he's in Wandsworth prison in the UK. He basically absconded in February 2004 when he was due for sentence for making threats to kill, assault, and intimidation.
That was after the raids, then.
And this was after the raids, yeah. But this goes back. This is one of these people that he'd victimised, who was forced into doing the kind of his dirty work for him, and that would have gone back as far as 2020. I think the local drug squad had them under surveillance, and they saw this man handing over a set of car keys to Gary Ward in the University Hospital car park. And when they moved in to arrest them, they found a tick list and drugs in the car. So Ward was arrested and questioned over this. And when he was released, he went straight to this other man's house and basically threatened him to tell him, "You're taking responsibility for these drugs, or otherwise, you'll be experiencing some violent retribution, I guess." So this man made a full statement to the guards, and but he also talked about how that he was basically recruited by Gary Ward. He was shown how to mix the drugs and bag them and sell them. He was threatened with an iron bar that he couldn't refuse in order to go to Dublin at any time to pick up heroin, and that he would be expected to do that on a frequent basis. And he was given a phone and told to turn it on at 10 a.m. in the morning and turn it off at 10 p.m. And while the phone was on, he was working for him. So this is somebody who has basically enslaved to a drug dealer. And that, they can't go anywhere. They might be able to nip into the loo or grab a sandwich or something like that, but they're not going off for a day out, or, they'll have to book time off if they wanted to go see a doctor or whatever. So it was a frightening place for that guy to be. So Gary Ward actually pleaded guilty to that at Galway Circuit Court, and he was due for a sentence then in February 24 and absconded then. So, if he's in Wandsworth in London, the chances are, I haven't been able to check this out yet, just over the holiday period, but generally anyone who's gone through extradition from the UK are usually up in Westminster Magistrates Court. Mm-hmm. And we've, in the past, and most of them have been held in Wandsworth when they're appearing there. So I don't know yet, but we'll presume that the authorities in Ireland have issued an arrest warrant and are looking to bring him home to face his time.
So you spoke about 2 Ford Focus cars, a transit van, 12,000 in cash, and a Rolex watch. But was there evidence given about the amount of money that was passing through the accounts that was spent? I mean, there was clearly a lot more money than that made over the period of time.
Yeah, they were talking about kind of, he was always driving mid and high value cars. They were often, using false names to kind of trade them and move them on quickly again and sell them back. So there was never any shortage of money. I mean, I mean, just even like when he was in 2020, when the car was found with the drugs in it, was 18 grand's worth. So it's all 5-figure sums knocking around. I mean, on the day that they raided him as part of Lamprey in August 2023, there was 12 grand in various bundles in the house. So I mean, that's.
I don't have that.
Yeah, there you go. And I mean, it's kind of the cash on hand, I guess.
€12 in various bundles.
And his brother Declan was also caught with, according to the cab evidence, he had 34,000 euro worth of cocaine, which he'd hidden in his 6-year-old son's bedroom. And that was actually covered then just 2 weeks ago by the Connacht Tribune when Declan Ward kind of he was sentenced for that. It actually said it was 31,000 in the charges. And he got a 4-year sentence for that. So 2 of those 3 brothers are actually behind bars at the minute. And Declan's role was described, I suppose, as being the liaison officer between the leaders of the gang and the people on the street. So he was kind of very much seen as more hands-on and kind of managing the street dealers. And that appeared to be his role in the gang.
The case against Gary and his wife has mentioned the brothers, but is there a target of their assets? I noticed that it was said that Michael, who lives in Carrick-on-Shannon, has a property he bought for 100,000 and he runs a home repair firm. Are they moving in and out of the country all the time with that business?
Well, he would have left Ireland in 2020 and moved to the UK for a while. This is Michael, and it said in the evidence that he still continued to, collaborate and direct activities for the gang while in the UK. When he came back, then he bought the house in Carrick-on-Shannon in Leitrim, and he's been doing it up as well. So he's been spending money on it. There was he has this roofing firm, or this kind of building maintenance roofing firm. That there's nothing registered, in the company's office. So I mean, they actually said in evidence that they weren't sure whether it was a legit firm or not in that regard.
Yeah.
But there was no evidence in terms of that they're after any assets belonging to him at this stage. So we don't know that at the moment. But I mean, it's not to say that there isn't going to be something brought up in the next couple of hearings, depending on whether or not somebody is going to contest it or not. Because essentially, Gary didn't contest this. He didn't appear. And they actually went through all the evidence about serving him notice through his wife in email. And that's how we knew he was in Wandsworth, although they said they didn't have an official letter from the governor to say that he'd been, given notice of this cab case. But the judge was satisfied anyway that service had been done.
These were likely an outfit that were identified by local Criminal Assets Bureau profilers. And that's still a huge arm of the Criminal Assets Bureau, isn't it?
Look, I mean, all that. I mean, it's all local, really. And I mean, there's been so many cases where the local profiler has, come up with stuff, and I'm sure they're asked all the time, "Will you, keep us updated?" And I mean, there has been ones where like a report went in, and then 2 years later, a second report on the same person goes in, and then they take action the second time, possibly because there's more assets, or it's, or they become more violent or more dangerous, or they just go up the list in terms of priority. And I mean, like they described the Ward OCG as being involved in a feud with another family-based gang in Galway that has led to arson attacks and intimidation. All that kind of feud violence, drug-related intimidation violence that we've unfortunately seen a lot of in the last kind of...
And which we've seen explode into way bigger situations than where they start, which is often just throwing of firebombs into one another's houses, and the next thing you can have a situation like Drogheda, where you have the whole economy nearly of the town on a knife edge, because these groups their war has spilled over into everybody's lives.
Yeah, and of course, again, sometimes it becomes personal between some of these individuals. Like you do wonder how bright they are that they have a decent drug business going, and yet allow themselves to be caught up in this kind of mindless sort of tit for tat violence that's going to cost them.
Yeah.
And, and turn anyone against them. And I mean, certainly, when you have people like the man who's being intimidated by Gary Ward giving a full statement and being cooperative with the guards, you can see, that kind of intimidation only goes so far. I mean, where do people go if you back someone into a corner? What are they going to do in the end? They're banking on these people being too weak.
Well, it's good to get a little bit of an insight into some of the activities and some of the characters that are involved in this in the Galway area, because more often than not, an awful lot of our focus is around Dublin and which of course is a bigger market, the biggest market in the country, and probably where a lot of the wholesaling comes from. But nonetheless, there are very dangerous and big gangs active all over the country. And, whether this information comes out of the Criminal Assets Bureau or through criminal cases, it's interesting to see that their reach is going outside the capital as well. So, Eamon, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Nicola.